Good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in America. We're in Atlanta because this is Butter.ATL. I'm Mike Jordan, Editor-in-Chief, Brandon Butler, Executive Director, and we are blessed by the presence of none other than Leader Stacey Abrams.
Come on, give it up to him, man.
All the places you could have been, you chose to be with us. We are grateful. We really appreciate you being here.
Happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
You're very welcome. And I know you're running for governor, so we're not going to hold you that long. Brandon, I'm going to let you kick it off.
Yeah, absolutely. So Leader Abrams, 5 years ago, Stacey Abrams was a statewide name. Now you're a household name, and I'm assuming that's for intentionally. So the question I have for you is, why do you want to be the next governor of Georgia?
I want to be governor of Georgia because I want to help people. It's just that simple. We live in a state that has some of the most vibrant communities, that has an exceptional capacity, and yet we have had leaders who've refused to harness that capacity. They've allowed their quest for personal power, they've allowed meanness and disinterest to stop them from really leveraging what we have in this state. I grew up in a family that was working poor. I have now been able to achieve a level of success my parents prayed for me, but they didn't know it would come to fruition. I want that for everyone. I want this to be a state of opportunity. And that means you have to have a governor who believes in everyone, even the people who aren't going to support her, but who's more importantly willing to work for everyone. And that's the job I want to do.
So when you talk about that work, every state is a little different the way that things are run. And some states have a stronger state legislature, you being a former leader of Georgia's House. This is a state where in Georgia, the governor is very powerful. So can you, for people who may not be aware and may not ever get the chance to ask, can you help people understand what the governor of Georgia can do to affect the lives of a citizen?
So think about the state as a business, because most of us work for somebody. The governor's the CEO, and being CEO doesn't mean you get to do everything you want, but you have a lot of ability to impact what happens. The state legislature sets the policies, but the governor is responsible not only for execution of the policies that have been set, but the governor manages the budget. The governor makes appointments of judges. The governor makes appointments for the Board of Regents, who decides how our university system works. The governor sets the tone for how we respond to crises. And when you have a governor who understands that power and is willing to use that power for others, you see progress. What we've seen, unfortunately, for the last 4 years is a governor who has been less willing to leverage that power for others and has been more willing to use that power for the powerful, helping people who already have something get more, but has done much less to help people who need something get anything. I'm running for governor because I've actually read the entire Code of Georgia. I haven't read in the last couple of years because I wasn't in the legislature anymore, but I believe in knowing about the job you want. But I also, as a state legislator, wanted to understand what the levers are. And the most important lever that the governor has right now is the ability to expand Medicaid. And I use that as an example because that's how you make certain that people have health care. It's how you create 60,000 jobs. But it's also a way to ensure that rural communities, where so many of our families live, that they get the economic development they need, but also the hospitals they need. We have counties without a single doctor in it. And yesterday I talked to a woman whose aunt passed away because the hospital that she needed shut down under this governor, and the ambulance couldn't get there in time to take her to a hospital in Alabama because Georgia couldn't take care of its own. The governor solves that problem. And so just think about the governor as the CEO of the great state of Georgia, and our business should be doing right by our people.
Absolutely. So just, piggybacking off of that, had Stacey Abrams been, elected and actually had a chance to win the election back in 2018, we were not going to get into what happened, but, had it gone a little bit differently, what would Georgia look like now?
Number one, we would have expanded Medicaid and 500,000 Georgians would have health care, especially young people. So Georgia is one of the states, and this is a decision that the state makes. You decide who can have access to Medicaid, who can have insurance if you're poor. Well, we've got a lot of young people who are graduating from college or graduating from high school with debt, or just they don't have prospects that are going to lead them to a job that gives them health insurance. In Georgia, if you're at the poverty line or even 35% above the poverty line, doesn't matter how poor you are, if you don't have children and you don't have a disability, you cannot get Medicaid in the state of Georgia. That means that we've got college students who are laden with debt, can't get a job, and can't afford to get sick. And so for young people, you would have had the opportunity to not worry about your health care, especially in the midst of a pandemic. And yet in Georgia, you have to worry. I would have made certain that the 60,000 jobs that could get created across the entire state, including 25,000 in this region alone, in the Atlanta region, that those jobs would have been available right now. And so we know that we could have been building our economy for folks who are told that, we're doing great, that Georgia has the lowest unemployment. That may be true, but that's because a lot of people have multiple jobs. And we want to make certain you have one job that pays you well. And then the third thing is that our response to COVID, especially for our children, would have been different. I agree with the school systems that had to shut down in-person learning because we didn't know what we were dealing with. But what I disagree with heartily is a governor who has refused to actually set policies. What he has said is choose your own adventure. Each school system, you pick what you want to do. I don't want to be responsible for telling you what to do. You don't hire a CEO for the power of suggestion. You want someone who will actually give direction and say, here's what you should do. Let's set a floor. You can do even more if you need to, but let's make sure we're protecting our kids. But at the same time, he didn't invest in our children. And so children who are falling behind economically, socially, academically, emotionally, he has no plan to help them. I do. I have a plan to say that I know that when COVID ends, you're going to bring the trauma with you. Let's make sure we're addressing your healthcare needs, your mental health needs, but let's also address your academic needs by fully funding education, not as a political gimmick in an election year, but as a long-term promise to your future.
To the point that you made about, sort of choose your own adventure. I mean, that tends to be sort of a conservative viewpoint in a lot of ways. And so that makes me wonder about when you are assuming you will be hoping, in some cases, some folks I'm sure, hoping that you're going to be the next governor of Georgia. When you get into office, obviously there will be that honeymoon period. In Georgia, it might be kind of brief, unfortunately, but...
I think it's called election day, but go ahead.
It might be overnight. But those folks are still going to be under the leadership of then Governor Stacey Abrams, if this goes your way. How do you convince those folks who think that they like that sort of approach, that I want to choose and not have the leadership of the plan that you have set in motion? In other words, how are you going to get that messaging? Because we've seen it over and over. Folks aren't usually understanding how a person from the other side can actually still benefit them in their everyday life. So how will you attack that?
So I spent 11 years in the state legislature, 7 of those years as the Democratic leader. But technically my title was minority leader. It was in the title. I was going to lose. Yeah. It said you have fewer votes than you need to get anything done. And so everything I accomplished meant that I had to work with the other side. And I was good at it. I was able to increase the budget for families raising children who are not their own. It's called kinship care. Because I found Republicans who I disagreed with on a number of other issues, but we had a common bond because we understood what it was like to have family members raising children who were not their own. And we worked together. The first job is to understand the other side. I don't revile Republicans. I disagree with them. I disagree with their policies. But as people, it's my responsibility to know what you believe and why you believe it. I don't have to change your beliefs, I just have to change your behavior. And so the best way to do it is to find common bond. These hospitals shutting down in Georgia because we haven't expanded Medicaid are in Republican, Democratic, independent areas. They're in white communities, black communities, brown communities. We can get this done because we can have a conversation about whose lives do we need to save. We can work on economic issues because money is green, it is not blue or red. And we can work together because I don't care who gets the credit. I want to make sure the work gets done. And when you're willing to work with someone else and let them get the credit, and you understand that you can compromise your vision, but you don't have to compromise your values, then a lot more can happen. And I've had a lot of practice at getting it done.
Can you name a current or former governor of any state that you think is doing a good job and why?
I think Jared Polis, who's the current governor of Colorado, has done a really strong job of responding to COVID. Not perfect, but he has been responding in a very thoughtful way to what's happening. I think that Governor Kate Brown in Oregon has been an exceptional leader on the issues of voting rights. She has been remarkable. I think Governor Jay Inslee has done really good work, and I will say, working with Governor Nathan Deal on criminal justice reform is one of my proudest achievements. That's an example of being able to work with people different value systems, or not different value systems, of different political systems, but where we both value the importance of criminal justice. We reduced mass incarceration in this state. Unfortunately, it's going back up again under this current governor, but I give Nathan Deal great credit for having the vision and the foresight to understand that we've got to do better by our people, because regardless of the mistakes you made, you should not be permanently excised from opportunity in the state.
We'll get more into food later on because we love food. We eat all the time. But thinking about food in the, I don't know, maybe esoteric sense or the broader idea, good food for the soul, good food for thought, good food for the body. There's a lot that goes into being a governor that has some influence over those sorts of things. And nutrition is a major thing. We're an agricultural state. There's a lot of former First Lady Michelle Obama made food a major part of her initiative as First Lady. What are your thoughts on good food in any of those spectrums? The food for thought, food for the spirit, food for the soul, food for the body. And what advice might you give parents?
My parents are exceptional people that I love dearly. And I often talk about the fact that they raised us with 3 jobs: go to church, go to school, and take care of each other. And so food for the soul, I'm a Christian, and the Bible for me is one of those texts that not only teaches us but challenges us to think about who we are. Regardless of your religious belief system. In fact, I was reading this interesting article yesterday by a Jewish writer about the book of Job. I think that there's an intellectual capacity to investigate who we are as people through both the historical and the faith traditions that are embedded in the Bible. Food for, they say, go to school. I read voraciously, and one of my favorite set of texts is the compendium on LBJ by Robert Caro. So if you want food for thought, this is a man who made his political bones by being just an aggressive and rabid segregationist, who also gave us the Voting Rights Act and the Great Society, which created Medicaid and welfare and created the social safety net that has saved millions of lives. That would be what I would read. And then I think in terms of food for the body, I would read any cookbook by Carla Hall. She is a Southern chef who has a recipe for how to make biscuits that really is worth studying. That's what I do.
I was thinking, I like those books.
I love a biscuit right now.
There you go. You said esoteric. I tried to follow you down.
That was amazing.
Thank you.
With all the great work you all did with you and the New Georgia Project did, especially through the 2020 elections and kind of helping flip Georgia and helping turn everything blue, there's a lot of energy and a lot of excitement about you running. But with that, you're not really the underdog anymore. People are, now when we stop and say, go vote, make sure you register to go vote, please. But, a lot of people are really excited about your campaign. Do you miss being underestimated, or do you still think that you're underestimated in some ways?
You should be watching Breitbart and Fox News. They do not consider me the ascendant candidate. No, look, the reality is I am privileged to be in a position where I do not have a primary opponent. But what we have, unfortunately, is a governor who continues being one of the foremost architects of voter suppression. SB 202 is a set of laws that will make it illegal to get water if you're standing in line. But it also under-resources our state, our county elections offices. It's allowed Black and brown people to be pushed out of positions, civic positions. There was a great article recently in the Washington Post about Floyd County where they systematically removed every Black member from their board of elections. Our elections are in jeopardy, but the way you fight back against voter suppression is, one, knowing that it exists. And I've spent time doing that through the New Georgia Project, through Fair Fight, through Fair Count. The second is that you try to figure out how you circumvent their policies, and that's the work we're going to be doing through this campaign. But the third is that you overwhelm them with your presence. The way we won in 2018, and I didn't win the election, but we won the record for the single highest turnout for Democrats in Georgia history because we overwhelmed the system with our presence. We did that again in 2020 and in 2021, and while it didn't work in 2018, it worked in 2020, it worked in 21, and it will work in 22. But now they know we're coming. And so our responsibility, and you did a great call to action, is to get more people to show up. I know it's hard right now. It feels as though there's no point to it. Life is hard. People feel pain. We are still grappling with all of not only the impacts of COVID, but we have to remember that we've been in the midst of a social justice revolution that seems to be stymied by inaction. But I want to remind people that voting is not magic. We don't elect wizards. They can't fix everything. We elect people. And people take time, and you've got to get other people to agree with you. Voting isn't magic, it is medicine. And that means we've got to take our medicine every election, every single time. Because the reality is, if you've ever had a sickness where you needed medicine, when you stop taking it and that illness isn't gone, it comes back and it brings friends. We saw that happen. When I didn't become governor, what happened with Brian Kemp was that he came back and he brought friends. He has created one of the most restrictive abortion laws in the country. If you are a woman who believes in reproductive health, and if you're a man who believes in women's bodily autonomy, then you should care. If you want to close food deserts in the state of Georgia, if you want to give access to health care, he has made it harder to be a successful Georgian for so many of us. But we can take our medicine in 2022, and I'm part of that regimen that you need to take.
Transportation is a major issue in the city of Atlanta, for sure. So it's hard to even think about other people's problems, because in Atlanta, we're just trying to get on 285 some days. And so merging has been a lot of our way of fixing things. But we've got Secretary Buttigieg in office under President Biden. As governor of Georgia, what sort of ideas and plans do you have to aid in turning Atlanta and the state of Georgia into a place that operates more efficiently with the transportation infrastructure?
Well, here I want to give credit to Senators Warnock and Ossoff, especially Senator Warnock, who has done a bill with Ted Cruz. Which is interesting because transportation doesn't care, 285 doesn't care who you plan to vote for. It is going to hold you hostage. And so one of the things of that bill is to making certain that we're looking at the interchanges and how do we reduce the traffic, because so much of the United States economy comes through the South. We know that John Ossoff has been working very closely on public transit and on making certain that we are expanding our transportation options. There are a lot of folks who are on our highways who simply, if they had a train they could get on, that would be happy to get off the roads, if they could get on a bus. And so we have 2 U.S. senators elected by those who showed up in 21 who were investing their time and their treasure in trying to make certain Georgia can solve its transportation issues. We have to not only deal with our clogged roads and bridges, we've got to deal with who's driving and where they're trying to get to. And while Atlanta focuses on, necessarily so, we're the ones who are sitting in that traffic, people are trying to get from here to somewhere else. And so we have to think about this holistically. I need to understand what's happening on the roads going down. I was in Cuthbert yesterday. What's happening when you're trying to get to Cuthbert? And if you've ever tried to take 75 south through McDonough, why do you spend 2 years of your life right outside of McDonough? So we've got to think about the whole infrastructure. And we've got to be thinking about, how do we get you from Albany to Savannah? How do we get you from Savannah to Athens? How do we get you from Athens to Atlanta? And how do we make certain, if you want to go to Tennessee, or go to North Carolina or South Carolina, how are we thinking about the whole of our infrastructure? That's the work that you do with a Democratic president and 2 U.S. senators who understand that they have to serve everyone, but they have to invest in transportation first.
So you're here as a candidate, but you've also been a voting rights advocate, and you've talked about some of the things you've accomplished, some of the challenges you've had. But I got to ask you, in the event that you don't win, what happens then?
I'll do what I did before. I mean, I've got a great deal of practice at not winning, so I've had 4 years to. And look, I believe in doing the work of helping people. When I didn't become governor, I created Fair Fight, Fair Count, the Southern Economic Advancement Project. I published 4 books. I started a production company, did a documentary, have a couple of TV shows that are under development. I've got some backup plans. So, but the reason I say that is to say I'm doing this because I want to do this work. We all have options, and there's no largesse or kindness in me running, and I don't want anyone to hear me saying that. What I'm saying is, I am called to this work. I am called to try to leverage this opportunity to do more. A very lovely young woman named Sienna asked me a question earlier today about being a leader. And part of leadership is doing what you think is right all the time. But that means when you see someone doing something wrong, you are responsible for challenging it. I think that Brian Kemp is doing this job wrong. and I'm running for governor because I want to do it right. But if I don't get the job, I still have work to do. We will still have the same challenges. In fact, he will likely make them worse. And so I'm going to find ways to serve, to mitigate the harm he creates, and to find somebody and find somebody else and find somebody else who can help make it better.
Transitioning to some different questions.
Yes.
You mentioned it. You talked about your calling, and you already mentioned you're an author. Selena Montgomery is not running for governor.
She's not.
But Stacey Abrams is now the author that everyone is familiar with. Stacey Abrams came on and said, hey, Selena, is Selena Montgomery going away? Also, what happens if you're on Paces Ferry Road in the governor's mansion? Will we continue to get more books, and specifically your novels? Because my understanding is you have some major fans out there who, I know book reading is it's a voracious thing, especially among college-educated black women. So you're gonna still be writing books?
So I've been writing since I was in law school. In fact, I spent more time writing in law school than I should have. That said, Selena Montgomery existed because I started writing romantic suspense at the same time I was writing tax treatises on the dissonance in our nonprofit tax code. It was much easier to get people to buy Selena Montgomery than it was Stacey Abrams, because it would be like reading romance by Alan Greenspan. It's not the way to sell a book. So I created the two identities, but my face is in every book and my name is in every book. Selena Montgomery took her retirement in 2010. I've been very privileged to have Berkeley Books. They're reissuing Selena's titles. There is a third book in a trilogy that I still need to get done because my sister mentions it every so often, right about the time she should be giving me my birthday present. So I'm going to get that book done, I promise. But writing is part of who I am. I've been lucky enough to write fiction, nonfiction. I've written romantic suspense. I've written legal thrillers. I've written my first children's book. I've got another one due. I've got a sequel to my legal thriller due. I got a lot of work I'm supposed to be doing. But that said, I will always write. Will I be as active in publishing while I'm serving? I doubt it. Yeah. But it will always be a part of who I am. And it is an extraordinary joy for me to be able to use my creativity in that way and to have people who like to hear what I have to say.
You're a graduate of Spelman in the AUC, 1995.
Yes, thank you for calling me out.
Well, look, I say it because that was a very interesting time in Atlanta.
Yes.
So what does Stacey Abrams from 1995 remember about that time in Atlanta? And did you ever go to Freaknik? No judgment.
We don't ask the questions. Some of these come from outside of us. It's not us.
Doing this for the people.
No. I did not actively participate in Freaknik in the traditional manner. I was indeed at Spelman during Freaknik's heyday. I was not among the hay. But it was also, a time for me. It was when I first got involved with voting rights as an adult, a young adult. I worked with Maynard Jackson as mayor. I was at the Office of Youth Services, but I was also registering my fellow students to vote, or at least trying to. I was in Manley Plaza trying to convince people on the way to Freaknik to sign up to vote. It did not work, but it became part of my raison d'etre. I wanted to make certain young people understood their political power. And so for me, the through line was, I was a nerd then, I'm a nerd now, I'm good.
When it comes to your personal style, someone asked a question and they said, Stacey Abrams is just always ready for the camera. So the question was, do you have a stylist?
I do not. Now, there are people who like to tell me what I should wear, but I by and large choose my own clothes. There are certain stores that I appreciate their brands and their ability to give you clothing that is both professional and accessible and comfortable. And so I try to, wear those brands. I'm not going to name check them because I don't want to get myself in trouble.
And no shout outs also.
No?
Yeah, no shout outs.
But you know who you are.
You look great. It's
well,
a beautiful
you.
color. I
Thank
really,
you.
really like
Thank
the
you.
color. We talked about Georgia again. Georgia's an agricultural state, and one of the things that happens in an agricultural state when it has certain laws is cannabis cultivation. There's been a lot of confusion around this issue, and some states have moved maybe forward faster than Georgia. Some are taking their time. But as governor of Georgia, what plans do you have for the cannabis industry and legalization?
So medical marijuana is legal with very strict constraints in Georgia.
Yes.
And the first responsibility we have is to make certain that the process for allowing those licenses was fair. There is a great deal of conversation about the process that was used, and I think it's worthy of us continuing to focus on making sure there was fairness in the process. And we know that that's been one of the challenges across the country, that when cannabis licenses are available in whatever stage, that we are ensuring that there is equal access and there is equity in the process. When it comes to cannabis legalization in Georgia, we have a very conservative state. My personal worry is that unlike other states that have legalized cannabis, Georgia remains a state that is unwilling to have the conversation. And so it is something I would be more than happy to discuss. And in terms of prioritization, it is hard to put that above saving the lives of our people first. Medicaid expansion for me consumes the conversation, because when we get people to the place where they're willing to act, where they can actively participate fully in the life of this state, I think there are other things we need to focus on. But I support legalization of medical marijuana. I support the conversation about I absolutely support decriminalization. But I think it is disingenuous to say that Georgia is in the position to move, for example, closer to where Florida has tried to go. We don't have citizen-led decision-making in terms of being able to put it on the ballot. And so you have to get the legislature to agree to it. I'm happy to have that conversation, but having worked with them for 11 years, it might be a minute.
Well, Leader Abrams, we know that you are moving around. You are actively running for governor right now. We really appreciate you coming and spending the time with us and our audience at Butter.ATL. Thank you. If there's anything that we can do to have you back on, let us know. We will not ask about Outkast or Migos in the future. We'll just leave it on the table.
Migos is really nice to me, and Outkast, I love them so. But here's the thing. I need people to go to StaceyAbrams.com,
Yes.
learn more about the campaign, and let me know what you think.
Well, thank you very much, Brandon.
Thank you so much for joining us, Leader Abrams. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.